We've officially hit rock bottom, maybe the lowest point in Miami Dolphins history. That Week 5 loss to the Carolina Panthers wasn't just bad, it was humiliating. Let's put this in perspective. The Panthers are one of the weakest franchises in the NFL right now. They've got a struggling quarterback in Bryce Young, a head coach still trying to prove himself in Dave Canales. And yet, they embarrassed the Miami Dolphins. After jumping out to a 17-0 lead in just 16 minutes, Miami completely collapsed. The Dolphins were outscored 27-7 the rest of the way. 6 punts and 7 drives. A defense that couldn't stop anyone. They gave up 239 rushing yards, with Rico Dowdle alone tearing them apart for over 200. That's not just bad football. That's a total breakdown of pride and preparation. And before we go any further, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with your friends. And of course, hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. We've got a lot to break down today, and you'll want to be here for all of it. Now back to it, because some of the decisions Mike McDaniel made were flat out embarrassing. You can't have that kind of hesitation or cowardice in a locker room that's supposed to be chasing greatness. The post-game quotes only made things worse. McDaniel said the Dolphins lost because of preparation and execution, and then admitted, "We thought we were prepared, and clearly we weren't." Are you serious? That's the head coach admitting he didn't have his team ready. That's not leadership, that's a confession. Sure, sometimes coaches take the blame to protect their players after a tough loss. But when your team has lost 4 of its first 5 games, when your supposed contender just got exposed by one of the league's worst offenses, that's not protecting the locker room. That's exposing how broken things are. The Dolphins jumped out early because Bryce Young practically handed them the ball. He literally fumbled under no pressure on the first drive, like he saw Bradley Chubb, and said, "Here, take it." But instead of stepping on the gas, Miami coasted. And that's why fans are furious, because it feels like this team doesn't just lose, it quits. Let's be honest, if those early turnovers hadn't happened, the Dolphins probably wouldn't have even had that 17-0 lead. In fact, we might have been the ones getting blown out by 20 against the Carolina Panthers. That's how bad it's gotten. Mike McDaniel looks completely lost when it comes to making in-game adjustments. Week after week, this team walks in unprepared, unfocused, and uninspired. For a while, people said, well, at least he beats the bad teams and loses to the good ones. But not anymore, because now, we can't even beat the bad teams. Think about it. We barely escaped with a win against the Jets, and even that turned into chaos late in the game. Then we blow a 17-point lead to a Panthers squad that had no business competing with us. That's not just bad coaching. That's a collapse in leadership. And don't even get me started on that decision to punt the ball down 3 points with just over a minute left. 4th and 18 or not. That was one of the most cowardly calls I've ever seen. Sure, the odds were slim, but you know what? The odds of converting that were still 1,000 times better than your defense getting a stop after giving up 239 rushing yards all game. You thought the defense would suddenly pull off a miracle? Come on. That's not strategy. That's denial. That's comedy-level stuff. You could pitch that decision as a stand-up routine and Netflix might call it a hit special. And speaking of bad performances, let's talk about Jack Jones. I don't think I've ever seen a defensive back try harder to hold someone on every single play. Grabbing, tugging, pulling. It was like watching a guy audition for a wrestling match instead of a football game. Every drive felt like a new penalty waiting to happen. Then comes the post-game embarrassment. Reports said Minkah Fitzpatrick declined to speak to the media. Now, technically, that's not even allowed under NFL media policy. Players are expected to address questions after games. But more than that, it's just not what leaders do. Look, maybe this sounds harsh, but that's exactly what this moment calls for. Fitzpatrick was once supposed to be the standard of professionalism. A first-round pick, a former All-Pro safety, a guy who was supposed to set the tone for the young players. But refusing to face the cameras after a loss like this? That's not leadership, that's running away. Have some pride. Stand up, own it, and show the young guys what it means to wear that uniform with respect. This team doesn't just need talent. It needs heart, accountability, and leaders who actually act like it. This is what drives fans absolutely insane. The deeper problem isn't just what happens on Sundays. It's what's happening inside the Dolphins organization from the top down. The leadership is rotten. The general manager? Questionable. The head coach? Lost. And that bad energy has started to poison the locker room. It's becoming clear that this team has no heartbeat right now. A few weeks ago, reports said the Dolphins' ownership would remain patient with Mike McDaniel and Grier as long as the locker room kept fighting for them. But after that second half against Carolina, you can't honestly say this team was fighting for anything. There was no urgency, no pride, no spark, just a bunch of players going through the motions while the season slips away. And here's the truth. When the locker room stops playing for its coach, it's already over. So what exactly are we waiting for? Because every sign is screaming the same thing. This team needs a reset. Then came McDaniel's post-game quote about the run defense. It can't continue to go on like this, and it's already gone on too long. Sure, he's right, but that's him shifting the blame toward defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver. Now, Weaver isn't perfect, but let's be fair. The man was handed a disaster of a defense. His two starting corners, Rasul Douglas and Jack Jones, weren't even on an NFL roster when training camps began. Jones was picked up in the first week of camp, Douglas on cutdown day. That's not a recipe for success. That's desperation. If the Dolphins try to make Weaver the scapegoat, that's just another failure of leadership. The problem isn't one coach, it's the entire system. This defense is soft, undisciplined, and completely lifeless. Every time they face resistance, they fold. The front seven that was supposed to be a strength looks more like a welcome mat. And it's not like they're getting beat by elite backs. Rico Dowdle, who came into this game averaging just 2.7 yards per carry, gashed them for 9 yards per carry. That's not just poor tackling. That's a lack of effort, of will, of basic pride in wearing that jersey. Opposing teams aren't scared of the Miami Dolphins anymore. They see the name on the schedule and think, we're about to have a career day. That's how bad it's gotten. A defense that makes everyone else look unstoppable. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, Mike McDaniel and Grier are the problem. There's no excuse left to defend this mess. The Dolphins blew a 17-0 lead to the Carolina Panthers, a team that got destroyed just a week earlier by the Patriots, 42-13. Think about that. The same team that folded like paper against New England somehow came back from 3 scores down against Miami. That's not just bad luck, that's a failure of identity. Everything pointed to an easy win. The Dolphins started hot, punched Carolina in the mouth, and it looked like the Panthers were ready to roll over. That's exactly what should have happened, but instead, Miami let them back in. After Carolina kicked a field goal to open the second half and cut the lead to 17-13, the Dolphins had 3 straight chances to put the game away, 3 drives to rebuild the lead, to make a statement, to finish. But each time, they stalled. No adjustments, no creativity, no killer instinct. Even Tua Tagovailoa admitted it after the game. He said the Panthers packed the middle of the field, got depth, and took away everything we wanted to do. And guess what? Miami had no answers. That's on coaching. That's on preparation. For the first time under Mike McDaniel, the Dolphins blew a 3-score lead. Before this week, they were 10-0 in games where they led by at least 17 points. That streak is gone, and with it, the illusion that this team can handle adversity. It's also the 3rd time under McDaniel that the Dolphins have lost a game despite being at least +2 in turnover differential. That's a statistic that screams coaching failure. You don't lose those games unless your entire team collapses from the top down. So, here's the real question. If you're Stephen Ross, how is this not the final straw? How can you watch a franchise crumble like this and still keep the same leadership in charge? Every single day that Grier and Mike McDaniel remain employed by the Miami Dolphins feels like a slap in the face to every loyal fan who still believes in this team. The fans deserve accountability. They deserve a team that fights, that finishes, that plays with pride. Right now, they don't have that, and that's why changes must be made. Every single day that Mike McDaniel and Grier remain in this organization sends one message loud and clear. Stephen Ross does not care about winning football. You can talk about patience all you want, but at some point, patience becomes negligence. Grier has been the general manager since 2016, and in nearly a decade under his watch, the Miami Dolphins have not won a single playoff game. Think about that. What other job in the world lets you fail for 9 years and still keep your position? Nowhere. And then there's Mike McDaniel. Over the past 2 seasons, he's shown flashes of creativity, but absolutely no ability to lead a team through adversity. He struggles to adjust when things fall apart. When opponents figure him out, he has no counterpunch, just confusion and collapse. Dolphins fans have every right to be angry. Enough is enough. You have to draw the line somewhere and demand accountability from ownership. This organization has been rebuilding for over 20 years, and fans are tired of hearing the same empty promises. If Stephen Ross doesn't act now, he's going to lose this fan base completely. And honestly, some fans are already gone. Many lifelong supporters have said they can't even watch this team anymore. Not because they stopped caring, but because caring has become painful. And here's the truth. If we're ranking the reasons this team is stuck where it is, Chris Grier sits at the top of that list. Mike McDaniel deserves criticism, but Grier built this roster. He made the draft picks. He made the trades. And while some moves looked bold, Tyreek Hill, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Ramsey, the results speak for themselves. The team went all in, and it still didn't work. Ross has continued to give Grier chance after chance despite years of missed draft picks and poor roster construction. And this year might be his biggest failure yet. 5 weeks in, and it already looks like another disaster. Kenneth Grant and Jonah Savinia, the Dolphins' top 2 draft picks, have been complete letdowns. Grant got pushed 8 yards off the line of scrimmage by a third-string Carolina lineman. Savinia, honestly, might be one of the worst starting guards in the NFL right now. That's not development. That's regression. At this point, keeping these two in charge isn't about patience. It's about pride. And if ownership doesn't swallow that pride soon, this team will keep spiraling into mediocrity while the rest of the AFC passes them by. At this point, it's almost painful to watch. Comparing Jonah Savinia to any competent NFL guard is an insult to the position. If Zach Martin is the gold standard, then Savinia is on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, and that's saying something. How much more of this can Dolphins fans take? Blowing a 17-0 lead to the Carolina Panthers, punting on 4th and 18, and fielding one of the worst offensive line units we've seen in years. Sure, losing James Daniels and Austin Jackson to injury hurt, but that's not an excuse for this level of incompetence. The Panthers came into this game allowing 132 rushing yards per contest, and yet Miami's offense averaged a miserable 1.6 yards per carry. Devon Achane had 10 carries for just 16 yards. That's not just bad execution. That's broken football. Some of it falls on the play calling, constantly trying to stretch the field wide when the line can't even hold its ground. But at the core, this is a roster problem. Poor construction, poor adjustments, poor accountability. So who's truly to blame? Is it Mike McDaniel for being outcoached week after week? Is it Chris Grier for building this fragile roster? Or is it Stephen Ross, the owner who continues to let it all happen? If you ask me, the ultimate responsibility lies at the top. Ross has allowed this dysfunction to continue, and until he makes a change, this team will remain stuck in the same endless cycle. The Miami Dolphins are supposed to be a proud franchise, not a yearly disappointment wrapped in false hope. Fans deserve better. Players deserve better. When accountability finally comes, and it must, the rebuild can truly begin. If you love real talk about this team, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because when that day comes, we'll be here breaking it all down, live.